Welcome to Locales Unknown. This podcast gives you the tools you need to choose your next travel destination and the tips you want to be able to explore like a local. Here are your hosts, Chris and Winfield.
Welcome back to another episode of Locales Unknown, everyone. Today we have a real treat for you. One of the most intrepid travelers I have ever had the pleasure of speaking with. Welcome to the show, Mark Zolo.
An absolute pleasure.
Thanks for coming on. So give us a little bit of background about your genesis story and how you started traveling all over the world. You have an amazing resume and all facets of travel.
Yeah, so I guess I could say I got lucky a bit when I was 18 because I had the pleasure of going to a scientific expedition in Antarctica, and it was probably the most impactful trip of my life. We had to rescue a Russian research vessel called the Vavilov. We got frozen in the ice. It was just an incredible trip. I met all sorts of interesting people. The guy who built the flying machine from Flyaway Home, he taught the geese to migrate. He was on the trip. There was a guy who had been down to the Titanic. There was all sorts of interesting characters. And in fact, the same group I was with, Justin Trudeau, actually went on the same trip. And so it was an interesting meeting of minds, and it really set the stage for what would become my future travels. Because after going to Antarctica, you can't go on a lad's holiday to Magaluf after that. It seems a bit boring. So when I was 19, I would travel in the summers during university, and my first trip was the stereotypical first backpacker trip, which is around Southeast Asia, the Banana Pancake Trail. And then which was a lot for a 19-year-old, but then I wanted to take up a notch. So I went from Cairo to Cape Town the next year with a friend of mine, which was an extremely adventurous trip. I mean, it doesn't really get more hardcore than going through Africa overland. And I just noticed that when I would compare stories to other backpackers we met along the way, you know the story, every hostel you go into, somebody says, oh, where are you coming from? How long are you traveling for? Where you been? It's the same story. And every time we would have those conversations, everyone was like, God, your stories are not like other stories. You should write a book. And people kept telling me to write a book. And that kind of was the reason why I started the blog. And I came out with my first book, Naughty Nomad. Got to #1 on Amazon for travel writing. And then after that, it just escalated further because I knew after the first book, I needed to up my game because I always knew I was writing a second one. And that's where we ended up. I found myself traveling to war zones dressed as a Mexican pirate, which sounds a bit crazy, but that's my last book, My Life as a Mexican Pirate. And that's even more crazy than all the stuff in my first book. And the stuff in my first book was pretty hardcore. I mean, we'd been jailed. We'd smuggled weed over 7 countries in Africa. We jumped borders. I mean, there was pretty mad stuff going on in the first book. The second book, though, with the Mexican pirate stuff, things got even more extreme. So that was kind of my the height of my traveling career. But I think when it was in Mogadishu, Somalia, standing over the head of a suicide bomber, I thought, maybe I'm taking this a little too far. So I kind of slowed down a bit after that, moved to New York, then moved to Malta, set up a few bars. And now I get my kicks from sailing. So I just bought my second boat now in the Caribbean. And next week, I am sailing all the Lesser Antilla Islands for a couple of months until hurricane season. So I'm a real pirate now.
Man, I don't even know where to start from that. There's just so many different tangents that we can go down.
It's enough for a lifetime right there. I guess my question is, you started off on this travel to Antarctica, excuse me. How did you land that one in the first place?
There was this thing called Angashka, which is the President's Award. They call it the Duke of Edinburgh Award in the UK. We call it Angashka. And part of that, to qualify, it's considered the highest academic award in the country. But to qualify for it, part of it has an adventure element. And I just so happened to be dating a girl in this little tiny town, Mulla, County Cavan, who also resided Jonathan Shackleton, who was the cousin of Ernest Shackleton, the great polar explorer. Probably the greatest story I've ever read, the endurance, epic story. And I met him. I reached out to him, and he got me in touch with a guy called Jeff Green, who was running these expeditions. I had to make an appeal. I had to write I think an essay or something like that. And I ended up being the only one from the European Union actually who got to go over. So it was a bit of luck from that regard. And it was that's how I got the ball rolling, and it was a good thing I did because of that trip I ended up representing Ireland for the award. And the very first time that the British royals, Prince Philip, came over, it was a joint award between the Duke of Edinburgh and the Ungashik. First time it ever happened in history. There was even protesters outside the building, and I got to do a speech in front of the president and Prince Philip, and then we all went for dinner together.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you just left both of us speechless. So, so yeah, picking up on some of your other expeditions, and as you said, now you're based out of Malta, but heading over to the Caribbean. How do you go about? I know that you've obviously been to all 7 continents. Do you have a specific?
No, I haven't been to Oceania yet. I haven't been to
Australia. Really? Oh, okay.
Oh,
well,
wow.
excuse me. Correction. Okay.
Yeah,
well, that's I'm sure that's in the near future. But how do you decide where to go, what to do? What is do you set out a year plan, or you just kind of spin the globe and say, okay, I'm going here now?
I usually look up the first places on the do not travel list. No, seriously, I for a while it was I like, someone said, oh, I've never been to Brazil, right? Someone gave me an option of Brazil and Afghanistan right now. I'm the kind of guy who will go to Afghanistan.
Right.
No, I tried in February and we didn't get the visa, but I don't know why I've always been attracted to the more kind of risky places. So I like the kind of obscure destinations. So they always hold more appeal to me than now. Mind you, I've done plenty of. Sorry, let me just turn this off. The sound here, but I've done plenty of travel in Europe. I've been to every single country in Europe. I love Europe. But I kind of mix and match. So mix and match. That's the best way to do it. Sometimes I want to go to kind of an Arabic Muslim country. Sometimes I want to go to a Caribbean country or something like that. So it depends what I'm feeling. Africa is my favorite continent, mind you. But yeah, so I kind of I sometimes pick destinations based on languages. So if I'm interested in learning a language, or I feel like I need to brush up my Russian, I'll be looking at the Caucasus or Central Asia, for example. So
There's obviously an element of both adventure and a risk tolerance there. So is that something that's been a common thread even before you started your travels down to Antarctica? Were you a risk taker growing up before you were 18? How did this all get started for you?
You see, I think I'm normal. I think it's just I have a regular risk tolerance. I don't think I'm scared of heights. So I mean, we all have. Some people get their kicks from riding motorbikes in the air. Some people like to go skydiving. For me, I just kind of like going to dangerous places. So I mean, I don't think I'm particularly. I wouldn't say I'm risk adverse, because I mean, I'm an entrepreneur, so you have to kind of have a little bit of risk taking in you. But I don't know what it is. I always kind of think I'm going to be okay, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting perspective, because not a lot of risk takers think that they're risk takers in a lot of ways. I mean, you're here to tell the story, going to these dangerous or quote unquote dangerous places. And each time you survive, and you just said that you always think that you're going to be okay. So that has to play a part in your choice going into it. But then when you mention that you're looking at ahead of a suicide bomber in Somalia, maybe there's a limit there.
Oh yeah, I mean, my risk taking has gotten me into some awful situations, especially when I knew I was writing my second book. I would purposely, especially my trips in Africa, I would purposely get myself into situations I knew I shouldn't get myself into, because I knew there was a story in there somewhere. And that kind of mentality, I got held hostage at one stage. I've been violently mugged. I've been jailed. I've been I mean, it's my risk taking has led me into all sorts of bad situations. What can I say? I keep pushing the boat out. I'm still alive, thank God.
I gotta wonder, well, what's your perspective on humanity after being in these certain situations? I mean, do you still are people inherently good in your eyes after looking at these risque events?
I'm quite an optimist when it comes to human nature. I think people are basically good, but you still have to have your head screwed on. I'm a bit sexist when it comes to my opinion on women versus men in that regard, because I'm much more scared of the women when I travel than the men. Because all the bad stories I have are usually involving women. They're the most dangerous thing. I always say the most dangerous thing in Africa is not war, corrupt officials, or crime. It's the girls you bring home at night. So I mean, but generally I think people are basically good. You can kind of suss people out. You can be, I practiced game. For those who don't know what game is, I got into like kind of pickup artistry, I suppose, when I was 18. So and I grew up in pubs. So I've always been around lots of social situations. My parents owned a nightclub at one point and a few bars. So I guess my social intelligence would be above most people's. So I'm pretty good judge of character, and I guess that serves me because I can tell when someone's a dodgy person, or I can kind of assess situations pretty well. But generally, I think people are basically good, and I'm a bit naive, I would say.
And how does that, in terms of when you were saying you just check out the do not travel list, more often than not, do those destinations turn out to be much more than what you read in the headline? Because in my experience, what I've seen, but once you go into a place that's supposedly a no-go zone, there's usually a lot more than meets the eye at first glance.
Yeah, and there's nobody at the tourist lines. It's
exactly.
Seriously. I mean, some of the best experiences I've had is from going to the worst places. Like I went to, when the war kicked off in Syria, I was there in February 2012, and that's when it was at the height of like there was people fighting outside Damascus. They got into Damascus, and there was helicopters flying over our heads in the morning, woke us up. Things looked pretty dodgy over there, but then we went on a pub crawl with some locals. And we went in with the Mexican pirate gear, and they bought us to a mustache Irish pub. I remember the name of it. And these guys just showed us around the whole place, and the warmth we received was incredible, because people are so appreciative when you come in and give it a chance. And the whole thing about Syria in particular, that was a revelation for me, because it was the exact opposite of what the media was reporting it to be. If you remember, Tunis fell. Mubarak in Egypt fell. Then there was Gaddafi, and everybody thought that Assad it was inevitable. He was the next domino. And they made it look like a popular uprising. But when I actually went there, we saw people on the streets, all right, but they were actually all pro-government. And everyone we talked to in the bars, and pretty much everyone we talked to, was super pro-Assad. They were like, we don't want Islamists taking over the country. As you can see, you can drink on the street in old Damascus. Like, look, there's Christians, there's Jews, there's Alawites. We're all getting along. Assad's not perfect, but it's a secular society. We do not want Islamification of the country. But if you look at Al Jazeera, it's telling a whole different story. Everyone was telling a different story. So that's when I really, before fake news was called fake news, that's when I became completely skeptical of mainstream media. So yes, you're dead right. Often what you hear and what you perceive is completely the opposite in a lot of circumstances.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because I had the same experience, not in the middle of the Arab Spring, but when I went to Tunisia with Ben Ali, and also in Egypt with Mubarak, and now Sisi. Very similar sentiments from a lot of people in the capital city. So we'll just keep it to that.
But, in the power structure, middle class, privileged. So obviously they're going to have an interest in keeping things status quo. So that's fair.
Right.
I'm sure if you
But
went
very
up to Aleppo, people have a different opinion.
Right. No, exactly. But it's interesting to hear two sides, because every story has two sides or multiple sides, right? So what we get in the Western press, they're obviously vested interest in that. And everything that you read and see, you have to take it with a grain of salt, and know that there are other sources of news and information.
Yeah, absolutely. And no, and it's funny. Like, Tunis is another place. Did you enjoy Tunis? Because that's quite a party place.
I love Tunis. That was the second stop of my honeymoon, so it was a little bit of a different vibe. But no, really enjoyed it. This was when was this? 2018. So it's been almost 4 years now.
Yeah, that's exactly when I was there. I was there around that time. I was down in Tazur, is it? And where Tatooine is, the Star Wars set and stuff like that.
Right.
Right. Did you didn't go to a restaurant called The Kitchen in Tunis by any chance, did you?
I don't believe so.
That's the
best meal ever. French or in English?
It's called The Kitchen. It was the best meal I ever had in my life. I actually cried. It was so good. It was a big cheese platter. But anyway, so where are you curious about, lads? I'll give you a tale or two. Or you've other questions there you have for me?
Well, yeah. What about because you always mention Africa as your favorite continent? Give us a little bit of a backstory about that, because I've only done the very North and South Africa, so there's a lot in between.
Yeah, and they're quite extremes. Once you go above the Sahara, it's more Middle Eastern in nature. They call it the MENA region for a reason. It's culturally similar, and South Africa is extreme because it's a really divided society. The most divided society in the whole of Africa, in my opinion. The race relations there are absolutely awful, especially when you compare it to other countries, because it's more like the States for me. But the rest of Africa, it's really, really chill. Race relations are great. People are friendly. I really notice a big difference between New World and Old World. If you go to the Caribbean, now I haven't been all over the Caribbean, but I've been to all the big islands, Haiti and Jamaica and all that stuff. They're not very welcoming to lighter skinned people, I would say, because of the history of slavery. They have a lot of baggage. It's a New World thing. Whereas if you go to Africa, that just doesn't exist. There maybe in some countries like Kenya, they might be a little bit indifferent, but generally people are just so warm and nice. And yeah, I guess why I love Africa so much is you can have more stories from 1 month in Africa than 6 months anywhere else in the world. And the nature, the adventure, it's just an incredible place. And it's really interesting how different each country is. You have a lot of people have this perception as Africa as this monolith, but it's shocking. Even in West Africa, I just presumed West Africa, at least West Africa would be similar, all the French countries and the Anglosphere countries. But wow, the difference in mentality, even the mentality and the culture within each place, because you got it's all about the tribe more so than the nation, with some notable exceptions. But yeah, I just love it. It's a real adventure.
So tell us some of these stories that you have. I'm so curious to hear some that make your top, memorable list.
Ooh, I don't know how PG do you want me to go on this podcast? Because I got some heavy stories.
When you say the most dangerous thing in Africa is the women, I can only imagine where these stories are going to be going. But yeah. Let's say PG-13 for now and see where we go.
13, okay, we can go 13. I guess I could talk about what happened to me in Somalia, because that's so when we were doing the whole war zone Mexican pirate thing, the first war zone we went to was Cote d'Ivoire during the Bagbo debacle, where he got ousted. That was pretty chill. Then we said, all right, we kind of got a taste for that kind of vibe. So we went to Syria next, which was at the time considered the most dangerous place. But There was one place in the world that was considered more dangerous, and that was Mogadishu in Somalia. It was considered the most dangerous, but it probably still is. I mean, there's still bombs going off there. The last mayor was killed in a bomb. Every so often, every Friday, there's bombs going off. And I guess what gives it that kind of X factor is if you look like me, you are definitely sticking out versus a Syria or maybe even Afghanistan, Iraq. I could look at me. I've white skin, but I have a big black beard, so I could pull it off in those countries. But in Somalia, I'm just not blending in. And to make it worse, we had sombreros and swords and fake mustaches and giant inflatable banana, and it cost you basically $1,000 a day for security. That's so I'm talking. You're in an armed SUV. There's a truck of armed soldiers. Like, you know, you'd have half a dozen to a dozen soldiers with you. That's the typical setup. But we couldn't confirm security for our trip, and it was the day beforehand. There was 5 of us, and 2 of the guys said, "No way, we're going without security." We decided to go anyway. As it turns out, the guys got on the next flight. They organized their own security, my 2 other friends. But it was me, another guy, and our friend. We were just staying in a cheap motel, $15 a night, no security at all. Whereas the other guys were in like Fort Knox. It was a big compound, sandbags, watchtowers, machine guns. So we got kind of radically different experiences. And that place was absolutely just wild. You go to the beach and there's like a designated area, and it'll be barbed wire all along where you're like the restaurant you're in, going into the ocean, and you have watchtowers there with machine guns because the restaurants always get targeted by Al-Shabaab, which is an extremist Salafist group over there, because they don't want women and men mixing. So anyway, and we got to see the side of Black Hawk Down. They still have the trucks or the vehicles that the Americans that they blew up. So you can still stand on the American, what are they called? AVs? I can't remember the name of them. They're like the armored. They're like armored cars.
APCs,
they're still there in the street 20 years later. Yeah, they're still there on the streets, and you can just stand up on top of them and take pictures. Till we got chased down. Some guys with guns chased us down, tried to get some money off, so we had to speed off. But we were on our way to a restaurant in Lido Beach, and 2 bombs went off. And when we arrived, I got all this on video. If you go to my YouTube channel, The Way to Mogadishu, you'll see it. So the suicide bomber, he blew up his car. At the same time, he blew himself up. Now, luckily, the security guard found the bomb before he got into the restaurant, so he only killed the security guard and himself. But we arrived, we saw the suicide bomber's head splat on the ground. His face was resting on this pink oozing brain, and he had no arms, no legs. It was just a pair of legs with intestines coming out the waist side of it. And it's actually all on video, believe it or not. I suppose I can't believe YouTube hasn't taken it down yet. But yeah, so that was a pretty extreme experience. And we met the mayor over there. The night before we had met the mayor, he gave us a certificate. Well, he was supposed to give us a certificate. The certificate never came, in fact, but we were recognized as the first official tourists to visit Mogadishu in 20 years. Now, there was some adventurers who had been before us, but this was kind of a publicity stunt, you know. So yeah, it was a wild time.
We have very different opinions of what PG-13 is, my man.
Oh,
no, it's good. It's good.
They play GTA. Violence is par for the course. It's the sexy stuff that I'm avoiding.
But there were a couple things in that story. First off, that I found interesting. So, every one of these war zones that you go to, do you hire security beforehand?
No, like that was the only time where my friends hired security. Me
Okay.
and I didn't have security for that trip. It was just my two friends who were a bit more cautious. But they got some video footage as well. It's up on that channel, so you see them. They got to go places that we couldn't go because you couldn't. Bakara Market used to be the largest arms market in Africa. Now it was made illegal, so everything is kind of under the table. Well, it was too dangerous for us to go without security. The guys, our friends there, our contacts there, they were like, no way. Whereas the guys with all their soldiers could definitely go in, and they got some pretty wild footage, just like a little kid, like with like cleaning out this giant tortoise shell, and just kind of and guys cutting up sharks, and like ambulances with like bullet holes in them, and it was just kind of random crazy footage, and it felt very hectic and scary. But unfortunately, we can get to that. But no, I don't usually do security. I just try and do as much research as I can before I go to a place.
Mm-hmm. And then, it seems like most of your stories have other people involved. Anytime you do these type of travels, is it a certain crew that you go with, friends or
yeah, it's a crew would be a good word, because it is like that. Because because of the whole pirate thing, it's very much the recruits,
nice.
And we go by crew, and we call the trips sieges, and we all have pirate names, Barnacle Barry or Guzzling Gilly, and like all these sorts of the pests, the whatever. We've loads of, everyone has, there's about, I'd say this, oh god, how many, there's a good solid crew of 10 of us. Okay. And it would mix and match between us. We mix and match between us. So basically what I would do is I wouldn't wait for anyone. I would plan the trip. This normally I would plan a trip. I'd set up a group, and guys, listen, I'm going here, I'm doing this, who's on board? And then people who wanted to go or could go would go.
On board, another pirate term there.
Yar.
Yeah, you're ready for your next adventure, man. You're about to go and live the real pirate life, huh?
Yeah, I'm actually more nervous about this trip than any trip I've ever done, because I got my first boat last year. Well, I guess it's last year, but it was a disaster. I bought it in Marseille, France, and it was the end of October, early November when we were trying to bring it over. I was bringing it over with the guy who taught me how to sail here in Malta. He's a 25-year-old Italian guy, but he's been sailing since he was a kid. And it was a 27-footer, a small little boat, but a strong boat, an Alpenvega they're called. They're famously seaworthy vessels. And first of all, we went out. We're trying to go from Marseille to Malta, so you're talking about a week sail at least, with no stops. Maybe 1 or 2 stops, but so we get out there, and the wind is completely at our nose. We're getting 30 knots of gusts, and the waves are just smashing us, and we're making like 1 knot, and the weather was getting worse and worse. The forecast was terrible, so we actually had to turn back. So look what we did, because the next day was like 40 knots. We would have been at the bottom of the sea. So we went out the next day. There was a small weather window, and instead of going attacking the wind, we kind of went perpendicular to the wind for 12 hours just to get out of the stormy area. The Gulf of Lion, that's what they call it, that area, and it's notorious for sinking ships. But we got out of that, and then on the 3rd day is when the tragedy struck. I also have this up on YouTube. I did a whole video on it. Basically, where it was nighttime, all of a sudden the lights go out, we lose power. And we're like, what's happening? Then we smell a rubber. We smell this rubbery smell, and we're like, what the hell is that? Then we see smoke billowing out from underneath the cabin. So it was a fire, and we had just spotted land. It was 40 kilometers from Sardinia. It was 3 days at sea. It's the first time we'd seen land. And anyway, absolute panic. There's a fire. I can't even describe the panic I felt in that moment. It was probably the most paralyzed with fear I've ever been. And we got down under, and of course, the first thing you're not supposed to do is open up the engine room from the inside. And I mean, he was an instructor here. He should know that, but I guess everyone's panicking. You're supposed to open up from the outside, He opened it up. Oxygen got in. Grabs the fire extinguisher. He was so panicked, like he sprayed it in his face. He was just sprayed it the wrong way. He was coughing. Finally gets around, puts it out. Long story short, we had to get the Coast Guard try to rescue us, but when our cleats broke off because of the waves, so we had to sail inward, close enough so we could get reception to call a professional company. And of course, when we turned on we finally got in close enough to power up and check our phones and check our Navionics app. We were headed straight for underground rocks, basically for underwater rocks. We would have run aground had we kept our course. So we had to do a little bit of shuffling. Eventually our phones were dying. We had no way to charge them up. So we had to give up and we had to get rescued. And the next day I got 3 visits. I got told you need to quarantine in the boat for a week. We've no space for you in the marina. So I'd have to move it, and it would be, I think, $6,000 for the tow. That's how much the boat cost, pretty much. So it was a bad morning for me. She's still in Sardinia. Black Rose is her name, but she got fixed after about 10 months. It was a nightmare trying to get her fixed. And then me and 2 Italian sailor friends of mine, we sailed it down the coast in August, and we left her at the capital then. So we got around the coast of Sardinia. It's wintering there for the moment. So that was my first offshore sail. So you can understand why I'm nervous about this one, because I don't have a very experienced sailor with me this time. It's just me. I've got friends and family joining me along the way. My parents actually are joining me for a bit at the start, and I got them to do a course here. So at least they can be my lackeys a bit. But I'm the captain. I'm the captain for this one, and I got a lot of sea to cover, and it's going to be very challenging. But I'm up for the task, so it's exciting stuff.
I saw the post on Instagram, but anyone that doesn't follow you just yet, can you tell us your itinerary?
Yeah, so I start in Grenada. The boat's in Grenada, below the hurricane belt. It's the kind of first island you hit after north of Venezuela and Trinidad. It's right at the bottom of the island chain, the Lesser Antilles. And so I'm going up all the way to Antigua at the top of the chain, kind of skipping every second island, every second country, should I say, on the way up. And then I'm looping back down, visiting the countries I didn't visit on the way up. And it's a couple of countries. There's like St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, apparently the best place in the world to sail, the Grenadines. There's Antigua and Barbuda, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia. Then there's the French islands, Guadeloupe, Martinique, St. Martin. Then there's Antigua, Montserrat, where else? Saba, Status. It's just going to be a wild time.
Indeed. And how did you, in terms of sailing, did you get interested in that to sail the Caribbean or the South Pacific? Because I know, for instance, moving around the Caribbean is very difficult with flights, and there really aren't any ferries. It's really hard to move between islands. So has that kind of helped your impetus to
exactly
to get into mariner and become a mariner?
I planned to do this 7 years ago when I was in New York, because the Caribbean was close, and that was the only part I hadn't been to, the countries I hadn't been to. And originally my idea was actually to get a jet ski, and because you can actually sail all the way so you can actually go from Florida all the way to Venezuela, an island hop. The biggest distance is 160 kilometers from Turks and Caicos to Hispaniola. And on a full tank and a jet ski, you'll go over 200 kilometers. So it's actually theoretically possible to jet ski an island hop all the way down. And my idea was to get some friends involved. We'll form like a jet ski gang, some roving pirate jet ski gang. It's like, how do we keep upping the ante? That was always my thing. How do we up the ante? I was like, that sounds good. But then my friends were like, yeah, but what if we break down and the seas are really bad? It's disaster. I was like, yeah, well, that's a good point. And then I thought, God, if we put all our money together, maybe we could get a sailboat. But I didn't think they were that cheap. And I started to look up boats, and I found, you can actually get sailboats pretty cheap. But I had enough money to do it at the end of the New York when I was living there. But then I was like, oh God, but then I'll be completely broke. I'll have to store the boat somewhere. And what else am I going to do with my life? So I decided I ought to invest it and set up my life a bit better before I can really set to sea, because the goal was not to sail. The goal was to become a sailor. And that's when I had that was the mental shift I had. Now, it took me 7 years to get to where I am now, but finally I get to set to sea in the Caribbean. And this will be the start of, it's not just that trip, it's going to be the start of a different type of adventure I get to do. So I am thinking about someday in the Pacific, but I'm thinking that in maybe 10, 15 years, get a big catamaran. Hopefully I'll have kids by then. So get the whole family to sail the Pacific for like 6 months or something like that. That's what I'm thinking long term.
So you're going to make your way to Oceania on boat eventually?
Well, I'd like to. One step at a time. The Caribbean is the blue slopes for sailing. When you start heading out crossing oceans, you're in the red, and the black one is a storm. So I originally my first boat, I was flirting with the idea of bringing it across the Atlantic, but after the horror that I encountered on my first offshore sail, I was like, no way in hell. After that trip, am I bringing this thing across the Atlantic? I am not there yet. So the Caribbean is kind of a good place for me to get my sea legs.
And I know you've talked about this in a lot of your blogs and literature, etc. But how do you balance travel with your entrepreneurial pursuits? Because, as you mentioned, 3 months, 6 months, I know you have a host of different businesses, but for people that are interested in more of a digital nomad lifestyle or financial freedom, what are some tips that you have?
Know the difference between having a business and being self-employed, because I mean, all the kind of businesses I set up beforehand when I was in Ireland, like I used to have a video production company, and I used to be a freelance animator, and I had a graphic designer and stuff like that. But they all required me to be there, and it required, because the skill level was so high. Now, as it happens, the production company in Ireland is still going, but it's my cousin's kind of keeping that ball rolling, but I don't take any cash from it. So I was always kind of making all my hustles, and I needed to be there. So I realized that I had to enter into a field or set up a business that did not require me to be there. And that's, I mean, businesses like bars, restaurants, you can find managers to run those things. So that's where I'm at now. Got a few bars and restaurants along with my family. And my family actually, my parents and my brother moved over after the success of the first two places, so they're all living here now. So it's going well, and the fact that they're here, I'm really not worried about it, because if anything really goes wrong, I got my family to back me up. So
yeah, I couldn't agree more. I just recently sold my digital marketing agency, but I was self-employed, not so much having a business. I worked more than 40 hours a week. It took all of my attention. And a lot of people have the aspiration starting a business, especially an online one, where you think you're going to work a lot less for a lot more. But maybe it takes a long time to get there. But I like your idea of things, of treating it more like a business rather than self-employed. Why did you choose to set up shop in Malta, of all the places that you've been?
When I moved back to Europe from New York, I wanted to be living in Europe because I loved New York. I loved it. It was the best time ever. But it was just a little bit far from home. I feel like Europe is my home. With the European Union, you can work anywhere. It's like a €10 flight when it's cheap. I mean, for me to go all the way back to Ireland, across the whole of Europe, the average ticket price is $30. It's so cheap. And I love that about Europe. You can just fly everywhere, $10, and you're in a completely different culture, beautiful city, beautiful food. It's just, Europe is just an amazing place to live. And I had been to Malta about 3 times before I decided to move here. It all started when it was a Mexican pirate trip around 12 years ago. I was with one of my mates, and he fell in love with a Swedish girl here. And he ended up moving here and working in the iGaming industry. It's like online gambling. And I had been around the world and visited friends who had expatriated to other places, Korea, Cambodia, UK, Canada, and my friend and France and other places. But my friend in Malta, he had the best lifestyle for sure, because he was making Western European wages, but it was Eastern European prices. So that's what they do with the iGaming industry. They pay really well, and everything's cheaper. Now it's gotten more expensive, mind you. But I just love the lifestyle. It's sunny, really south. I mean, it's further down south than Tunis in Tunisia, Africa. It's tiny now. It's really tiny. It's like 400,000 people. It's not even half the size of the smallest county in Ireland. It's literally like a dot in the pin. You couldn't see it on a map. But everyone speaks English. It's got a beautiful old town, the Valletta. It's by the water. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's €2 a pint. So the drink is cheap. Not in my bars, mind you. I sell craft beer, but I'm for a different market. But yeah, I mean, it was just another thing is you can buy real estate here as a single person. In Ireland, it's impossible for a single person to buy real estate because you can only get 3.5 times your salary. The housing market is insane there. There's a big crisis. Every guy I know and every person I know who lives in Ireland, they have to basically get with a person, a woman, and she has to have a really good job. So in Ireland, when you're dating a girl, it's like, what do you do for a living? She needs to have a serious good job for you guys to combine to buy a place. It's people struggle over there. And also the taxes. In Malta, the taxes are great. Some of the best taxes in Europe. You can set up a holding company in Gibraltar, and then with remittances through Ireland, you can get like a 5% tax rate. So there's all sorts of benefits. There's a reason why the crypto people are here and the gaming people here, all the dodgy money. I mean, it's a mafia state. It's just, and there's no real rules here. The laws, like everyone drinks, drives. You never see police. My first bar was a speakeasy for a year. I didn't even have a license. So I know So yeah, there you go. And then when the police found out about it, they just kind of were like, "Oh, come on, what are you doing?" And they kind of gave me a couple of months to sort out, and there was no fine or anything. They don't have a litigious culture. Like insurance is nothing here. People don't sue each other. It's just and it's really international. People from all over. We got all the English schools are here because Malta is English speaking, but it's cheaper than the other countries. So we got loads of South Americans over here. We got loads of Koreans, Japanese, Russians. And with the golden passport scheme, so there's a lot of Arab and Russians and Chinese. They come over, buy a place, get a citizenship. So it's a real cosmopolitan feel, and it's kind of a Singapore feel. And I just love it here. And setting up business is really cheap. There's no rates. Insurance is nothing, as I said before. I got some great deals with rents. Labor costs are half what they are in Ireland to employ people. So yeah, I mean, it's been a blessing. It's been a blessing. It really has, Malta. And also, I can keep my boat here. I got a sailing culture.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah, for sure. And as you were talking about, Malta's been on towards the top of my list to visit for a while for all the reasons you just mentioned. But does it kind of have that what is it, small island syndrome? What's the term where everybody knows everybody?
Yes. Yeah.
It's a little incestuous.
Good luck having an affair over Malta because it's such a tiny spot. I mean, but I like that about it. I love that because I feel like in New York I felt like a small fish in a big pond, but here I feel like a big fish in a small pond because everywhere I go, or not everywhere I go, but a lot of places I go, they go like, oh, that's the owner of those bars. You get treated with a certain amount of respect. And I feel like a real part of the community here. I employ, or should I say we employ, because it's not just me. It's my brother and my parents involved now as well. And my wife. My wife opened her own restaurant, in fact, just around the corner from the house. She opened with her dad. Her dad and her sister moved over as well, and they set up their own restaurant. So they got a life going here as well. So we've kind of our fingers in many pots, and we employ a lot of people, and we've created a nice community here, and I like that. Listen, if I was even for single people, because they have a huge party scene down in Patchville, you got so much tourists in the summer. So, like, if you want to be single, it's a great place to be. But if you want to set up a life, it's a great place to be too, because you have that sense of community. So, kind of has the best of both worlds, I would say. I miss green. I miss nature, though. There's no rivers here. There's no mountains here.
Hiking, sailing.
There's a little bit of hiking. There's a little bit of hiking. There's a few, but there's no. I really miss green. Like there's a little bit of green, but it's kind of like south of Spain. That kind of arid environment. But the good thing is, Sicily's less than an hour away. And you got Mount Etna there. They even got skiing up there. You got snow. It looks like Bavarian forest. Like Sicily is one of the most beautiful places on the planet. And that's just, I mean, constantly in Italy because we're just so close. And Italy is where I get my kicks, you know. And I mean, Italy is probably, it's the most visited country in the world. It's, I mean, what compares to Italy? It's just an incredible place.
Yeah, you might lack on the nature in Malta, but it's a step up from New York by far. So no concrete jungle for you, at least.
Well, at least you got Central Park, I suppose. I love upstate as well. You know, you go upstate New York on the Hudson. God, it's gorgeous. That in the fall, upstate New York, I have a real sauce. But one of the nicest places I've ever been, to be honest. Yeah. And the variety, you get more variety as well in New York. I mean, and also ethnically, it's very different. That's one thing you don't see. You see, there is a few. There's a bit of African influence here, but it's nearly all refugees from Somalia. You got an Ethiopian restaurant around the corner, thank God, because I love the Ethiopian food. But it's like not a lot of. You rarely see like African women around. It's like usually like the boats that come over is like 90% guys. So that's the only disadvantage. Because I'm not single anymore, but when I was single, I did like that about New York because I like the dark skin, and there was plenty of that in New York.
And just to close the loop on Africa, I meant to ask you this earlier about Somalia. So Somaliland up in the north of the country kind of borders Ethiopia and Djibouti. If my geography is correct. That is its own government that's relatively safe and stable, but it's still a part of the Republic of Somalia officially. What's the distinction there, and is it a place that you recommend checking out?
I was there as well. Yeah, it's got its own government, its own currency, and it's very much its own thing. But the Somaliland is quite divided politically because around 50% of the people wants to reunite with Somalia, whereas another 50%, I don't know if that's the exact percentages, but because I always talk to the taxi drivers here. There's a lot of Somali taxi drivers. I always end up talking because when I tell them going to Mogadishu, they're like, oh, they want to have a chat. And the impression I got is that it's like 50-50, half want to be independent, half want to reunite. But until southern Somalia get their act together and Puntland get their act together, that's not going to happen anytime soon. As far as I know, they're kind of happy with the status quo as it is at the minute.
Got it. And that leads to another question. How do you count your countries? Do you go by the UN list, or do you go a little bit broader with the territories and overseas departments, etc.?
Good question. I include Palestine. I include Kosovo, Taiwan. I've also been to Transnistria, Abkhazia, Nagorno-Karabakh, all these kind of little self-proclaimed republics. If I think there's a high probability that country is going to be independent in the future, I'd likely visit. I know like New Caledonia, I think, is supposed to be, and Bougainville. Is it Bougainville as well in Papua New Guinea?
Solomon Islands, yep. They're going to be.
Yeah, and I think Guadalupe eventually would like to do it as well. So I mean, I'll visit anywhere, like anywhere that's a distinct territory. But yeah, I expanded a bit more than the UN because the UN is kind of a corrupt organization controlled by the Security Council. So they're, I mean, like not claiming Taiwan as a country when a de facto is. I think de facto is, if it's a de facto country, I count it. That's the, which is why like
up to?
Sorry.
What's the count up to?
I'm thinking of 197 in my head. That's the number I have. Even though I've been to a lot of extra ones, but 197 is the official one, I suppose. I'm 113. So I'd slowed down in recent years. I was at 100 on my 30th birthday. So I've only visited 13 new countries in 5 years. But that's because I've been focused on what I'm doing here. Yeah, so I've not been thinking about. I've been more business orientated in the last couple of years. But now I'm at a different phase. You know, I was working as an art director in the gaming industry. I never revealed this publicly. It's the first time I'm saying this because of cancel culture. I've seen a lot of people in my field get fired from their positions because they were considered politically incorrect and people were organized against them. I've had mobs go after me. I've had newspapers go after me, so I know what that's like. So I've been that's how I was able to invest in a property, because they wanted an official workstation, and thank God I had that position, because the government closed all my bars during COVID-19. So when we opened our third place, I was going to leave my position. It a good position, and art director is a decent position. But thank God I didn't, because all the bars closed. We got no help from the government for our rent. One of our places alone is €4,000 a month. The government gave us nothing for that. So we exhausted, over a period of 18 months, exhausted all our reserves. And my income was the only income out of, at one stage, I had 5 people living in my house. There's only 3 of us now, but I was the only person earning cash. Mm-hmm. So I paid the mortgage. So it was actually, I went to COVID was very, very challenging here. But yeah, so and because I had that position, I obviously couldn't travel as much as well. Now I traveled plenty. I was in 10 countries last year. I was in 10 countries last year, 10 countries the year before, even during COVID. So I still was doing plenty of traveling. But the thing is, I was going back to a lot of places, countries I've been before, especially in Europe. It was because it was a bit more restrictive with the movements. So I would have traveled more otherwise.
And you have what, 15 countries coming up on this trip, the sailing trip?
New ones, I see. New ones, I think only 7 or so. Okay. 7 or so new ones, because I already went to Grenada and Barbados to buy the boat in the first place.
Right.
So I've already gotten them off the lists. It's I'm less focused on the ticking off the countries thing than I used to be, because there's a guy called, have you guys heard of Johnny Ward?
No, I don't know Johnny Ward. No.
Well, there's 2 people you should try and get on the podcast. They're legends. Johnny Ward he's probably the most impressive traveler in existence at the moment, because he traveled every single country by 33. He's rowed across the Atlantic. He's done ultra marathons all over the world. And now he's going to be the first person to visit every country and climb all 7 summits. He's climbing Mount Everest this year. So he's the very first person. He's an Irish guy, first Irish guy, I think, to travel every country. He's a huge blog. He's a massive blog. He made like €2 million from blogging. So he's a legend, and he does a lot of work for charity now. He just got married to this beautiful Thai woman. He's bought a house over in Thailand. So he's a really cool guy, and he's definitely worth talking to. The fact that he rode across the Atlantic, he's a very impressive guy. And then another person you should definitely talk to is Vagabjorn. Have you heard of Vagabjorn?
I watched your episode on YouTube.
Every country by 29.
Wow.
And 29 years. Unbelievable. And those 2 guys, they had a similar experience. So they visited every country when they were very young, like 29, 33. And I know certainly for Johnny, he went through a serious amount of depression. He wrote about on his website 2 or 3 years. He had to battle with alcoholism. He was lost. And Bjorn as well said he was kind of like, he felt like a bit depressed, anticlimax after. Imagine achieving that amazing goal so early. So after visiting my 100 country when I was 30, I was like, you know what? I'm not in a rush. I kind of had that mentality when I was 27. I got wise to it because it was going so fast. I think I'd visited half the world's countries by 27 or 26. And I said, you know what? I'm going to slow down, because I think it'd be much better to be visiting my last country when I'm like 50 or 60, with children or something like that, because then I'll spread out the joy of exploring the world and take it a bit slower. Use the boat, slow and easy, really get in there. So that's kind of my philosophy. That goal of visiting every country has taken sort of, it's not my sole focus now. It's not my sole focus, because, I want to have a realistic life, a healthy life. I want to have a family. I want to build businesses. There's a lot of things I want to do. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And the fact that you've broadened your focus out, as you said, because I had a very similar, I haven't been to nearly as many countries as you have, but I'll hopefully be hitting 80 in the next couple of weeks, going back from Brazil to the States. And I constantly think about that in my head. What's the balance between going to a new place and settling down in a place and just working I don't know 2 or 3 jobs simultaneously, for instance, or doing something that builds you on the spiritual side or another aspect of life. So I think that's definitely something that people nomads struggle with a bit, is to order your priorities and what's number one, right?
Yeah, I know, because like I know I have a couple of friends. The guys I went sailing with, they're really interesting characters as well. One of them guys, Ivan, he took a car and just drove from Italy, ended up in Mauritania, just drove all around the desert on his own and stuff for just kind of mad stuff. Now he's bike riding across Colombia, I think, and these kind of, it's interesting the way people do different things. Some people prefer to do like a month here, a month there, which I think is really cool. But sometimes, some places you want to stay for just 3 days, some places you want to stay for 3 years. And then also there's a difficulty, like when you sign a lease for a year, that's a big commitment. And sometimes it's difficult to get places for a month. And sometimes, you meet people, you're making friendships and stuff like that. This, when you're constantly traveling and moving around, there's sort of a transient nature to it that kind of a bit sad in some sense. Like New York feels very transient. People are always moving. No one's really from New York. Well, there are people from New York. I mean, I dated a girl that was right from New York, but I mean, everyone's in and out, and sort of a transient nature that's almost a little sad. So I think it's not a bad idea to base yourself somewhere else. Not, you should definitely get out of your hometown. Do a few years here, do a few years there, somewhere that interests you, and then make that your base, and then just travel from that base. That's kind of, you're getting the best of both worlds then.
Yeah, I would lean towards that type of travel. I've never really been one to tick off all the boxes as far as I've been to this amount of countries, but it's about the experience I have in each one. What interests me at that point in time in my life, will go and I'll explore that region, have that adventure there, and come back and explore my own country too. So I've lived all over the place in my own country. So you get a different feel, a different perspective. But I've lived in New York too. I'm from the Northeast. I'm not from New York, but I'm from just across the river. So I get it completely. It's a cool vibe though, when you're used to that and you're able to see that transient, you understand that people are on the move too. Although there is a ping of loneliness, it's also inspiration as far as people don't hold themselves back or hesitate on making a big decision or making the leap to something else because it's so common. So it gives you a little bit more of a courage, I would say, to go after what you're looking for.
Yeah, no, I think, well, I mean, you guys have a podcast called Locales Unknown. So you definitely have the bug. We're just preaching to the choir, but all of us to each other. And people listening to this as well, I'm sure they're very much in that mindset.
Yeah, 100%. That's something we preach here too all the time. Get out of the comfort zone, go. That's why Locales Unknown. Don't just go to the resort sitting there. Now, don't get me wrong. It's fun to have that all-inclusive every once in a while, but go see what the world's like. Go see, maybe there's a different style of living that just attracts you more, and that's where you do sign that 1-year lease. Maybe you go to 100 different places for a couple days each one. So just go out and explore your own way.
Where are you guys living now, may I ask?
Yeah, I'm in Florida right now, northern Florida in Jacksonville. I've been here for almost a year, but next month I actually take off. Doing a little bit of South America roaming. So I'm going down to Argentina, starting in Buenos Aires. I'll make my way down all the way to Ushuaia, up through Chile.
Nice. Ushuaia is lovely. That whole area is lovely.
I'm really excited. Really excited. No end date in sight. So I'm doing more of the backpack and see what happens.
Oh, that sounds terrible. I feel sorry for you.
And I've been down in Brazil for almost the past 3 months now. I just got back from Argentina on Monday.
Your missus is from Brazil, right?
That's correct. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've similar taste. So I have mine's Colombian, so we both like the Latin spice.
That's for sure. Yeah, but no, I've been here for a while. I'm going to be heading back stateside in the next several weeks, but already thinking about how I can cross paths with Chris or you or whoever. That's the thing. Once you're part of the travel community, you know there's somebody out there that's you're going to come across in whichever country you are at the moment. So.
Yeah, you just spent 5-10 minutes talking about Malta, and I'm considering changing my plan. I'm like, oh man, that sounds amazing. I want to go there. Why go to South America now? There's just too many.
Well, listen, go to South America.
Yeah.
Are you single?
I am, yeah.
Go to South America.
We just got back from Brazil. You don't have to preach to me, man.
I mean, like, listen, Malta's a good place to live, but to be honest, if you're here 4 days, you'll see the whole country. I mean, as a visitor, it's more of a place to base yourself. But no, if I was single, I'd be straight away doing exactly what you're doing. Don't change your plans. You speak a bit of Spanish?
Not yet. No, I'm working on it.
Yeah, it's a nice language. It's easy. I think it's the easiest one for English speakers to learn.
Yeah, definitely easier than Portuguese. Portuguese is if you have a Spanish or Italian background, that just kind of it mixes together too much. But in any case, on to our signature lightning round, where we ask you 10 questions. And are you ready to start?
Yeah, shoot.
All right. So one wish, what would it be?
Oh, god damn. I have all my wishes, lads. I got so much wishes right now. Let's say a bigger boat. I'd like a bigger boat. I wish I bought more Bitcoin.
Yeah, right.
Well, that makes 3 of us, right?
That's how I got the boat, actually. There's all crypto money. But I shouldn't have sold so much of it so early. But I mean, I wish I had a giant funnel of unlimited money and didn't have to. So that I don't know what to tell you. I mean, I'm pretty set. I'm a lucky guy.
Nice. Which country do you want to visit the most, and why?
Afghanistan keeps eluding me. It keeps eluding me. But right now, I don't see much of appeal of it because I've kind of got I was in Pakistan for a long time, so I don't know why I have this really strong urge to visit Papua New Guinea and walk across, because there's no road connecting the south to the north of it. So the only way to actually cross Papua New Guinea is by plane or to walk. And there's a thing called the Cocoa. It's called
Dakota.
The Cocoa Breed. Yes, that trail.
Dakota Trail.
It's like 10.
Where the Aussies were. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like a 10-day trail to get across. Yep. And I just think that would be a totally different type of adventure, because I've never done like a proper, just my feet walking through the jungle, surviving out there. That sounds like fun to me right now.
We just got back from the Amazon about a month ago, and we had a preview of that. And we spent the night in the jungle and just completely terrified. Yeah, so that's the next level up. We might have to join you.
That's my style for sure. Those multi-day treks with the backpack, and you just go from point A to point B. That's my style. Machu Picchu, I did that. I did Mount Everest Base Camp. I've done
nice. Nice. I love Nepal, man. It's a lovely, cool.
Oh, it was beautiful.
Yeah. So what's one place or thing in the world you still really want to do? I know we've touched on that a little bit, but
really, 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 and I guess it's because of this trip. I would love to do the Pacific, sail the Pacific. That's definitely a big one. And it, like the Caribbean, you ought to have a boat for that to really do it properly, in my opinion. Like people flying in here, they go to this city, they go to that city. There's thousands of islands. You need a lot of time there. A nice boat. That would be. It would take a lot of time. It'd be a bit harder to organize that one, but I would love to do that.
Indeed. And strangest thing you've eaten?
I get balut. You know what balut in Cambodia?
A lot.
Where they
in the Philippines too.
Gross. They let the egg develop with the feather, or like jeez. I've unfortunately, I have to admit, I've eaten dog as well in China, which I'm not too proud about when I was younger.
So have I.
Yeah. I wasn't told it was dog. It was this local guy. He's teaching English there, an American guy. And he ordered all these dishes. I said, "Do you like that?" And I said, "Yeah, it's a bit chewy though." And he said, "Yeah, that's dog." And I was like, "Oh, I felt like I was eating a soul."
Well, the worst one for me is there was those Lazy Susan of dumplings in Hong Kong, and it just kind of went around, and they were like, "Oh, try everything." And afterwards, they're like, "Oh yeah, that one's bull testicles." I'm like, "Oh, okay, well, that explains it."
Yeah.
So
spermy.
yeah, right, exactly. So what's your favorite thing about the world as a whole?
I think, it's a weird thing to say, I think the differences between us. It's, I am kind of a little bit different than most world travelers who have kind of a liberal, let's all love each other kind of view. I like the divisions. I like the differences. I like people with strong national identities. I like the tribalism. I think it's a feature, not a bug. I love the diversity in culture and language and the way people think, and I like adjusting and understanding each one, and it kind of provides you with a new challenge. Especially for me, if you know my background, I used to do this thing called flagging. I'm not sure, but I used to, let's just say, I used to get very intimate with the country between the sheets usually. So I like the challenge of having to deal with different cultural programming. I just love the diversity of it all. I'm a sucker for waterfalls as well. I love a good waterfall.
And what's if you could choose one or maybe a couple continents, must-see attractions in the world that really stood out to you?
Apart from Antarctica, my favorite place was Victoria Falls in Zambia. That place is just gorgeous. I have just super fond memories. I remember it was a special night of the month where you have these, I think they call it moon rainbows or something like that happens. These white kind of rainbows that happen at sunset. I just remember the sunset over there. It was a very special moment for me. And it's very rare when I get like that feeling like that. And I can pinpoint it to certain places and certain times, but definitely Victoria Falls in Zambia. I'm trying to think of another place that evoked that same. Yeah, where I was in Boracay in the Philippines on a canoe just between islands. It was El Nido, I think, and just those purple sunsets and the karst scenery. That was a very special place for me as well. And where else really sticks out? I love Ethiopia just as a whole. Ethiopia is just incredible. Probably my favorite country to visit, to recommend, because it's just so unique. Yeah, so
it's quite a roundup.
Yeah. Iceland's good too. So many places.
We can just keep going down the list.
Yeah, so many good places.
Indeed. What's one tip you have for travelers?
Don't be afraid to go alone. Don't spend your time waiting for other people. People are always want to get their hand held. They're not afraid. That's where you really learn the most about yourself. And yeah, sure, sometimes it's lonely. Sometimes it's maybe even boring. But that's where the magic happens. You're completely free to do what you want. You end up meeting people on the road. Maybe you change your plans. Maybe you even end up in a different country because you were with these people. And that's kind of the main tip I would give someone. Oh, and try and learn the language if you can. Pick up, like, before you go. That always that's a big thing as well.
Excellent advice on both fronts. Couldn't agree more. And what motivates you to travel?
Good question. When I was I was gonna say, I'll tell you a story about why I wanted to visit every country, but that's a different story. The travel, I guess, since I was a kid, I've always kind of been a bit of an explorer. I always loved like Indiana Jones films, James Bond. Those are the kind of films that really kind of resonate with me. And I was just obsessed with exotic locations since I was a kid. I just always had a yearning to just see the world, I guess. Just since I was a kid.
And which mode or more modes of transport do you recommend to get around the world?
Well, obviously, the answer to that one. But aside from sailboat, it's always fun to rent and get a motorbike and especially if you're visiting an island like Bali or something like that, a week, or Palawan, with these islands, just grab a bike and go around with some friends. Like that is just a cool way to travel. I always like traveling by bike. Yeah, so bike and boat, they're my two favorite for sure.
Yeah, couldn't agree more about the bike. I did 1 month, well, really 3 weeks in Bali, just going around the entire.
Oh, you did in Bali too? Oh,
yeah,
that place is gorgeous.
Just completely really solo. Had my day pack. I didn't even keep my big backpack. I kept that at the hostel in Ubud and just asked them to post it up for a couple of weeks. Took my little day pack, put it on my bag, and just went all around the island, man. It was awesome.
But Bali's incredible.
Yeah,
like Bali, even with all the tourism, you can still find places that are completely unspoiled. It has the nature of the Philippines. It has the architecture of like Nepal. The people are so friendly. It's got the beaches. It's got everything. It's so cool.
There's magic in the air, especially when you go out west or up towards the north when there's not a lot of tourists whatsoever. I remember going to like Pamutaran or Singaraja, and I was the only Westerner white face around, and it just felt unreal.
Yeah, and their culture is so rich, Bali.
So rich. Yeah.
No, indeed. I did that in Camiguin in the Philippines, and just going off the side of these mountains. Camiguin? It's right off Mindanao.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool.
Yeah, very nice. Yeah.
Philippines is great fun.
Yeah, it was a blast. I was actually living in Manila for a while at the time, and I used to just every weekend I would go somewhere different. No, I was with my ex at the time. We were living in
was she Filipino?
BGC. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
that's you get a lot of attention as a Westerner over in the Philippines.
That you do.
It's probably the most question. Anywhere I've been that you get you get a lot of female attention over there. That's for sure.
Indeed. And final question: if there's one experience you could relive in your life, what would it be?
You know, when I look back to my fondest memories, it was always with friends doing the Mexican pirate thing in Eastern Europe. You know, Africa, Asia, all that's fun, but it's always a bit dodgy. Whereas Eastern Europe, like the Balkans, the Baltics, that's just unadulterated fun. It was just always a great time, and bonding with my friends like that. That was just that they were just special times. And even like last year, we went to Belarus and Ukraine for my friend's stag. Just even remember what that was like. Just the energy with all the going out dressed all crazy and just partying and having a good time. Like those things are always they really resonate with me. And also I would say something I definitely would do again was I trained with my brothers doing MMA in Thailand. You know, that whole you go off and do the camps and stuff like that. Not that it was an enjoyable experience, but I think that should be a rite of passage for every guy, honestly. Like training, doing a boot camp somewhere like in martial arts and getting yourself in shape. I after doing that trip, I was like, I want to do that with my kids. I think everyone should do that for like a month or two, learn how to fight, get yourself in shape. I thought that's just because we don't really have good rites of passage for men anymore. I mean, in olden days, you had traditions, you had even the religions provided things like confirmation, communion, all these pseudo rites of passage that people don't really take seriously at all nowadays. It's just kind of a way to get cash as a kid. So I definitely think we need to establish rites of passage for our kids and for men in general. So I don't think there's enough of that. Yeah. So I'm rambling a bit, but just sharing my thoughts. These are good questions.
Completely agree with that. The MMA one, was that all like jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai?
Yeah, everything? I do jiu-jitsu here. I'm a big jiu-jitsu fan. Yeah, but we did Muay Thai, Western boxing, grappling, even sword fighting. They teach at the Tiger in Phuket. It was so cool. And then at the end, they have this place in PP where it's like, I don't know if you know this. It's like it's a boxing venue. But you can drink at the stands, and anyone can get up to fight. So me and my brothers
I've been there. So we were trying to find someone to fight, and this guy came out of nowhere. He was from I forgot, and he must have been 100 pounds heavier than me. I'm like, no, I'm not fighting you. I'm gonna sit down with my little bucket here, and I'm gonna watch. Yeah, man. I lived on PP for a month.
PP is amazing. Oh man, did some mushrooms there at my brother's, man. It was a wild time.
Wild, man. It's wild, but I completely agree about the rite of passage, and even within the travel community, going to Southeast Asia, doing that route, almost a rite of passage. Your first solo trip, in my opinion, is the rite of passage for all the reasons.
Southeast Asia is the best place to go for to start off. If you're just like a start off traveler and you just want to go somewhere, Southeast Asia, I mean, you can't beat it. Like,
has everything. It's a good experience. It's safe. It's cheap.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great.
Safe.
It's a good start.
So much to see.
Yeah.
But it can be a little bit dangerous if you go looking for it.
Very true. Mark, we're going to have you back on because there's just not enough time to tell all of these stories and to give a roundup of all your adventures. So thanks so much for coming on today. For anybody that is not already following Mark, naughtynomad.com.
I think actually, sorry, that site. So I don't know. I'm retiring that site. My last post was retiring on sailing. So if you want to catch me now, you're better off. I just started a Substack, because I said I'm married now, so like I'm done with the whole naughty nomad thing. I want to have kids this year, so I put that to rest. And now you can find me on Substack. So if you go to just markzolo.com, it'll link to the Substack. And I'll be doing my kind of newsletter blogs through there, but also you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Naughty Nomad, and on Amazon you can find my books. I have oh no wait, I forgot, not the camera's not working, but I have Naughty Nomad, which is my first book, then Naughty Nomad's Guide to New York City for anyone who wants to hit up New York City, and then finally my last book, My Life as a Mexican Pirate. Hopefully the audio book will be out in the next 6 months.
Thanks again so much. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for the time, Mark.
Anytime, guys.
So without further ado, we are back with another fun fact. There are currently in excess of 250 travel advisories on the U.S. Department of State website. It just goes to show, from Liechtenstein to Japan, the world is currently in upheaval, but you got to figure it out for yourself and find the next hidden gem.
Well, there you have it. Another fun fact about a locale unknown. Thank you, Winfield, and thank you, everyone, for tuning in to another episode with us. We started this podcast in the hopes of shedding some light on the various destinations out there in the world that might be more off the beaten path. And we're hoping we're accomplishing that goal by bringing on our friends and our various guests to give us some insight about their various locations and what to do in the areas. So if you like what you hear, make sure that you follow us on all the podcast platforms as well as the social media platforms out there, because we're back every single week. I wouldn't want you to miss what we have coming up. We already have a couple great guests in the pipeline that we are very excited for, and I think you guys will be too. So we are on Apple Podcasts, we're on Spotify, we're on Google Podcasts, we're on all the other platforms. Locales Unknown. Go ahead and hit the search. When you find us, be sure to hit the follow or subscribe button. And if you're an Apple Podcast user out there, please let us know how we're doing. We're building this for you guys. So scroll down to the bottom of Apple Podcasts and go ahead and leave us a review and maybe some comments there. Also on social media, we are very active on Instagram, on TikTok, on Facebook. We have our YouTube channel, so feel free to go ahead and drop us a line. We have our website, localesunknown.com. You can find all of our episodes there. And if you want to reach us directly, we have our email address, contact@localesunknown.com. Maybe you have some suggestions for us. Maybe you want to introduce us to someone that you think might be a great fit for the show. We are all ears. So once again, thank you so much for listening. We'll be right back here next week with another great episode somewhere out there in the world. Stay tuned.